Ruth, I want to talk about the motor voter debacle, because that's really what it is for the last 20 or so years. But first, in the state of California, the place where you reside and where you work and where you watch the election cycles, and you'll be watching on Tuesday, June 5, at these various precincts, just not only in Southern California, but all across the Golden State. It's not a matter of whether there is voter fraud, really, in California. It's a matter of how much voter fraud, right?
Well, of course, I think that's true. In any state, fraud is going to be there because it's always been there. It's a matter of how strong your laws are and how good the enforcement is to keep that fraud at bay.
But in California, there are certain precincts where there are more registered voters than there are people in the county, for example. I mean, it's craziness.
Yeah, and this isn't the only state where that's the case, and it's being looked into. But there are just all kinds of ways that that some of the more recent laws have kind of exacerbated the situation.
All right, motor voter. In California, they have turned it into, and they've used the federal law as a platform to turn it into an opt-out system. In other words, you go and apply for a driver's license, you're necessarily being registered to vote. But now, and this is a new program, relatively new for California, and now we're seeing there's some, hiccups in the system.
Yes, this was a law that was enacted without proper protections in the law to make sure that the voter rolls didn't become even more bloated by people who shouldn't be there and people who are there already, because there was just no protection written into the law. And we tried to warn the public. We talked to the author of the law. We talked and wrote letters of opposition to the committees that were deciding whether that law was even going to make it to the floor. And nobody really listened. And so then we talked to some attorneys to ask if we could file an injunction to keep this law from going into effect until it could be amended and put those protections in place. But sadly, the law can't do anything about potential harm. They can only address it when it happens. And it's practically impossible to find it once it does happen.
And so now we know that in essence, in some cases, this system is destroying the entire concept of one person, one vote. Multiple ballots, 2 ballots in some cases, per person registered through the DMV.
Well, it has that potential, yes, and it has been that potential since 1993, and then that ticked up way up when Obamacare was passed, because now insurance companies also became agencies of registration, and people who are interacting with governmental officials think that they have to fill out everything in the packet that's given to them, which means they're filling out multiple applications, and that's how we get duplicates on the voter rolls, and then for some reason they don't all get caught and get taken off. And so now with our opt-out system, we don't even have any control about who pushes that button and puts us in the voter rolls again.
Let's go back to 1993, time obviously we were much younger in 1993. Bill Clinton was president of the United States, and he signs the National Voter Registration Act of 1993. We knew back then it was insidious, it was going to be ingenious in a way on the part of the Democrat Party, but it was going to necessarily allow corruption to the system, and that's the reason why the Democrat Party, and unfortunately too many Republicans, supported this thing.
Well, it certainly appeared to be well-intended in that it was a way to make voter registration a lot more ubiquitous and
right, that was on the surface. That's the way it was sold to the American people, right? But it allowed for this platform of corruption in California.
Well, it did, and also at that time, there weren't any states of which I'm aware that were even considering issuing driver licenses to people who were non-citizens. Now that multiple states, including California, are offering driver licenses to non-citizens and illegal citizens, then that means that all of those people have access to the voter rolls because of the 1993 Act and then the 2 acts that California has passed subsequent to that.
Right, and we know that there have been survey after survey of people who are not United States citizens admitting that, yeah, they voted in our election cycle, right, and nothing's done about it. And so a system like this just exacerbates that potential and that crime. Really, it's a crime against we the people, the American people, for that to happen.
Absolutely. There is absolutely no political will to go after that situation, and so it continues, and it gets bigger and bigger every year. The Pew study, which is certainly not a conservative think tank, but their study indicated that about 14% of non-citizens and illegals in this country admit to being registered and voting.
What would happen if the Republican Party in Washington, D.C., and they're back as of today after another vacation, they say, you know what, our priority now is going to repeal motor voter. Wouldn't that necessarily change the dynamic for all of these transgressions regarding our franchise, the right to vote in this country?
Well, I think it might change the dynamic. I don't see that even beginning to be talked about.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One American News on YouTube. And call your cable provider and kindly demand that One American News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.